In this video, I'll be showing you this tubular cast on method for 2x2 ribbing when you're knitting flat. And this cast on method is specifically for when you have a number of stitches minus 2 that's divisible by 4. So that's a lot of numbers there, but I'll go through the direct steps in a minute to see if this method is applicable for you. I do also have another video that goes through the steps if you just have a number of stitches that is divisible by 4. So I'll link that video down below. So here you'll see this edge down here is where I did the cast on method. So it just takes the stitches and it curves them over to the other side. So it gives a really clean, professional edge. First, I'm going to go through the materials you need to knit this or create this cast on edge. Then I'll show you each of the steps individually. And then finally, I'll show you the finished project and how to cut out the waste yarn. Also in the description box down below, you can find the written version of all these steps for a more detailed explanation. The materials you'll need for this cast on method is first, you'll need your knitting needle. So I recommend either using the same size that you're using for the ribbing or going down one needle size. Next, you'll need your working yarn. So this is the yarn that my actual project will be knit out of. Then you need some scrap yarn. So I'm using the same weight. So you're either going to want to use the same weight or use a lighter weight, so a thinner yarn. And here I just have kind of like a peach color yarn. So this yarn, we aren't going to need very much of it. We're just going to use it at first and then cut it out before we're done the video. You'll also need a cable needle for when you're rearranging your stitches. If you don't have a cable needle too, you can just use an extra double pointed needle if you have one of those. And then you're going to need some scissors to cut out the waste yarn. The first step is we're going to want to calculate how many stitches we need to cast on with our waste yarn. So the pattern will typically give you the number of stitches you need total in your ribbing. So this method's going to be applicable if you have that number of stitches minus 2 and that number is divisible by 4. So that was a lot of numbers I just went through, but let's look at an example. So let's say it's at 18 stitches. If I have 18 minus 2 divided by 4, that should give me a flat number. So that would be 16 divided by 4, so that would be 4. So basically what we're doing is we're doing knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, but then we're going to have an extra knit 2 at the end. Now if you have something like the pattern asks you for 16 stitches, minus 2 divided by 4, that one's not going to be a flat number. So that would be 14 divided by 4, that would be 3.5. So we cannot do that using this method. If you have this number of stitches, you're going to want to look at my other video that I have that I'll link down below. So now that we know that we can use this method for the number of stitches we have, we're going to want to figure out how many stitches we need to cast on with our waste yarn. So I have 18 stitches, so I'm just going to write waste yarn cast on. And how we're going to do this is you're going to take the number of stitches that you want to cast on divided by 2 plus 1. So here I want 18, so I'm going to do 18 divided by 2 plus 1, so this would be 9 plus 1, or 10 stitches. So this is how many stitches I'm going to cast on with my waste yarn. And then you'll see we'll do increase rows to get all the way up to my 18. When you're doing your cast on with the waste yarn, you can use any cast on method you'd like, because this yarn will be cut out. So all we really need this for is kind of like a base that we can add our working yarn into. So I'm just going to use a long tail cast on method because that's my preferred cast on, and cast on my 10 stitches. There are my 10 stitches. So now I'm just going to cut this yarn. I usually leave around 6-inch tail or so. We're just going to cut out this yarn anyway, so the length of the tail doesn't matter much. You just don't want it to unravel. And then I'm going to turn my work. Now we're going to begin working with our main fabric yarn, so the main color of our project. And the first row, all we're going to do is we're going to take the working yarn and we're just going to purl directly into all of those scrap yarn cast on stitches. So I'm just going to purl into each one of these 10 stitches. Now I've purled into each one of those stitches, so I'm going to turn my work. And the next round we're going to do is going to be an increase round. The increase that we're going to repeat across is first we're going to knit 1. Then when we slide that stitch onto the right needle, there's this bar that forms down below. So this is the bar between the last stitch we worked and the next one on the needle. So we want to pick up that bar with our left needle from front to back. Then we want to bring our yarn to the front and purl into that stitch we just picked up. Then slide it onto the other needle, bring our yarn to the back. And now we're going to repeat that set of 2 stitches. So we're going to knit 1, pick up that bar from front to back using the left needle, bring our yarn to the front, purl through that stitch, bring the yarn to the back again. And we're going to continue doing those 2 until we have 2 stitches left on the left needle. I now have 2 stitches remaining on my left needle, and the last thing I worked on my right needle was I picked up the bar in between and I purled into it. So now I'm going to bring my yarn to the back again. I'm going to knit into the next stitch. Then again we have that bar in between, so I'm going to pick up that bar from front to back. And now instead of purling that, I'm just going to knit these 2 together. Now if I count the number of stitches on my needle, I should have 18 stitches. Or if you're following along with your actual pattern, you're going to have whatever number of stitches you should have for the ribbing. The next row is going to be where we rearrange the stitches into the knit 2 purl 2 fabric. So this is the most difficult row of this cast on method. And basically that's just because you want to make sure you get everything in the right order, so you got to be paying attention to where the repeats begin and end. So first, an important thing to show will be how do we tell which of these stitches should be knit stitches and which ones should be purl stitches. So anytime you see one of these and it has a bump on the front, so for example, this one has a bump on the front, this one has a bump on the fabric, but this one doesn't. So any of these ones with the bumps are going to be ones we want to have purl stitches. And then any of the ones without the bumps on the front, those are going to be our knit stitches. So we need to rearrange all of these into knit 2 purl 2 ribbing. Now this is the wrong side of our fabric too, so keep that in mind. So these first 2 are purl stitches. So I'm just going to slip those 2 onto my right needle. This next stitch doesn't have a purl bump on the front, so that would be a knit stitch. And after we slip these 2, this is when our repeat's going to begin. So I'm just going to slide the knit stitch onto my left needle. Then, using my cable needle or double pointed needle, I'm going to slide the next stitch on the left needle and hold it in the back. Slide 1 from my left needle. Then I'm going to take the stitch off my cable needle onto my right needle. And now finally I'm going to slide 1 more stitch from my right needle. From my left needle, sorry. So basically what I did there is this is a 4-stitch repeat. So my first one was a knit stitch. Then I rearranged these 2 stitches. So now I have knit, knit, purl, purl. Okay, so let's see the repeat one more time. So I'm going to slip 1 stitch from my left to right needle, take the next stitch on the left needle, put it on the cable needle and hold it in the back, slip one from the left needle, slip the stitch from the cable needle onto the right needle, and then slip one more stitch from the left to right needle. So again, we just rearranged those 4 stitches. So we have knit, knit, purl, purl. Now you're going to repeat it again, and you should end up with just basically groups of 4 stitches. So I'll have this repeat of 4, and then finally one more repeat of 4. So you want to make sure after you finish each repeat and you've done the whole row, there shouldn't be any more stitches left over. So again, I'll show it one more time. I'm going to slip the first stitch from my left to right needle, hold the next stitch in the back of my work, slip one from left to right, add the stitch from my cable needle onto my right needle, and then slip one more stitch from left to right. So now I just have one more group of 4, so I'm going to do it one more time. Now I've rearranged all those stitches, but I haven't worked them yet. So now that I've rearranged all the stitches, I'm just going to transfer them all back over again to my left needle. For the next setup row, we're going to purl the first stitch. Then we're going to slip the next stitch purlwise with the yarn in front. Bring our yarn to the back, knit 2, then bring your yarn to the front and slip 2 purlwise. And you're going to continue repeating this knit 2, bring your yarn to the front, slip 2 purlwise, bring your yarn to the back until you have 4 stitches remaining on the left needle. Now that I have 4 stitches remaining on my left needle, I'm going to knit 2, bring my yarn to the front, slip 1 stitch purlwise, and then purl the final stitch. Turn my work, and now we'll do the final setup row. So in this row, I'm going to knit 2, bring my yarn to the front, slip 2 purlwise. And I'm going to repeat those 4 stitches again, so I'm going to knit 2, bring my yarn to the front, slip 2 purlwise. And continue doing that until 2 stitches remain. I now have 2 stitches left on my left needle, and here I just slipped 2 purlwise, so I'm just going to knit the final 2 stitches. Now when I turn my work, I can begin just working regular knit 2, purl 2 ribbing. So my first 2 stitches here are going to be purls because we have the purl bumps towards us. And then the next 2 are going to be knit stitches because there's no purl bumps on those. So I'm just going to start working purl 2, knit 2 ribbing for a couple of rounds, and then I'll come back and show you how to cut out the waste yarn. The final step will be to cut out the waste yarn down the edge. And how I tend to do that is I'll stretch out my fabric as I'm holding it, and then there's these holes that form. So it's a little difficult to see with that background, but there's holes that form down this edge. So I'll just put my scissors into each one of those holes and then cut through them. And you want to make sure to take your time so you don't accidentally cut your actual working yarn or accidentally cut the tail off. So now that I've cut all those, you can just pull out the little pieces of yarn then. And now here is my tubular cast on. So you can see it's very stretchy and it gives you a really nice knit 2 purl 2 fabric. And I always check to make sure, let me get that to focus, the ends are nice and secure. So I'll just lightly tug on some different pieces along the edge, all the way down the side. You can see that the edge just curves around to the other side, which gives this a really professional look. And then at this edge, sometimes you'll end up with one loop that looks like it isn't attached. So for me, it would be this loop over here. Now that loop actually is secure, but oftentimes what I do just to double secure it is I'll just take the tail of my yarn and thread it through that loop. So there is the 2x2 tubular cast on. When you have a number of stitches, -2, that's divisible by 4. And you see why that you have that extra 2 stitches basically. So we have knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, and then all the way at the end we end with another knit 2. So this is definitely a common cast on number of stitches when you're using this method. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. And they're also in the description box below, there's a PDF version of all the steps I just went through. So feel free to print that out and follow along with the video, or print it out and use it with whatever pattern you are currently knitting. So I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.